Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Dylbozer's Den. Today we're going to skirt down a path. We're going to go through a maze. We're going to go through a labyrinth. I'm not talking about Pan's Labyrinth. I'm not talking about David Bowie's Labyrinth. I'm not even talking about the Lost Woods. What I'm talking about is Maze Envy from Civerous. This is their debut record on 20 Bucks Spin. First thing that really struck me about this album was the artwork, and it made me think of the Majesty's record that came out in 2023, not realizing it's the same artist. This beautiful purple artwork that's sitting over here to my left of this amazing record. It also makes me think of Hellraiser, Hellbound, the second Hellraiser. Makes me think of that whole kind of like maze of torment they're in at the end of the movie before Leviathan makes his appearance or its appearance. The album kind of sounds that way too. And that is very much a thanks to the mixing and mastering done by Andrew Solis, who is the guitar player in Apparition, as well as Nick Townsend, who, again, mastered the most recent Apparition record. So you got some familiar names there. You got kind of a tie-in with the artwork with another 20 Bucks Spin band. This is a Death Doom record. Or at least that's what I've been told. It just sounds like good heavy shit to me. There's a lot of death metal there. There's a lot of doom influence. There's some black metal influence for sure. There's a lot of atmosphere. And some of the deeper cuts on this record, that's to say a death metal record ever has a single. But some of the deeper cuts on this record definitely feels like the California band, the black metal band, Weakling, with their record Dead as Dreams. I get a lot of that kind of cascade, that almost post sounding explosions in the sky or Godspeed You Black Emperor kind of vibe. I'm not as familiar with those two bands. I've heard a few things throughout the years. I'm a little bit more familiar with the post black metal stuff. So the Weakling comparisons hit me immediately. I'm not sure if it's a concept record. It definitely feels like musically there is an overarching theme throughout many of the tracks, such as all of the clean kind of arpeggiated and picked intros on many of the tracks. You know, stuff like Endless Symmetry has a great clean picked intro. It feels like both guitars at the beginning are playing two separate parts, but they have a tonal center that as long as they're hitting that tonal center, it definitely feels like they're playing the very same thing. But if you listen really closely, it's two polar different parts, or two completely different parts there that are being played. But to go on with the clean intros, you've got Endless Symmetry that has this great kind of clean intro. You've got Labyrinth Charm that has a very similar motif kind of taken from the prior track. You know, that's a great overarching thing throughout this whole album. You know, you've got a great blending of these death metal stylings, and I've done a lot of reviews that have sounded kind of in that same area of death metal. That's been this very kind of mid-90s sounding death metal stuff, like the George Fisher era Cannibal Corpse, you know, albums like Vile, Gallery of Suicide, Bloodthirst. You've got a lot of these bands that are drawing influence, not just from that kind of first wave Florida death metal, but they're drawing from the kind of later albums from some of those early bands, which I think get glossed over. Like, we all know about, you know, The Bleeding or Tomb of the Mutilated, but no one really brings up like Vile in the same vein, and they should, because George is the best. But I definitely get a lot of those feelings on this album. But I also get some great doom metal feelings on this album as well. You know, from the Peaceville 3, My Dying Bride, Anathema, and Paradise Lost in their early days on that one. You couldn't give this album to just the basic death metal listener. There's a lot of textures on this album. There's a lot of keyboards. There's a lot of synths being used in the background to really address the mood and set the mood. And I love that about this record. You've got some great synth sounds going on in here. You've also got a lot of dissonance as well. A lot of stuff that makes me think of Portal and their Outre album. Butchered my French. The only French I know is Omelette du Fromage. Thank you, Dexter's Lab. I got a lot of Portal. I got a lot of Ulcerate on here as well. I've mentioned that band a lot, and it seems a lot of bands are really playing around with the dissonance and using it very well. A la Nashville natives Pelagius. You start out with an intro that really sets the mood of the album with some synth sounds called the Azure. And then you kick right into the first legitimate track on the album, which is Shrouded in Crystals, which has one of the best drum performances I've ever heard from the band's drummer, Aiden Yuner. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. Big about names. This track just sets the pace of the rest of the record. You hear every instrument very clear. I shouldn't say a lot, but there was a period of time in extreme music where everybody wanted to sound like an older band or an older production. That's not to knock any of those older productions. Like, I love Scott Burns as much as the next knucklehead, but we have modern kind of techniques to record. Let's make it sound in that sense, but still keep the roots and the feel of those original recordings. And this recording is great. Hearing bass in death metal is such a great thing. Not just because I'm a bassist myself, but because it's an instrument that needs to be highlighted more. And there's a great rattling, kind of ratchety bass tone on this record all throughout. You hear it in different points. It fills the low end. It's distorted, but you still get those moments of clarity where it like pops out. Great performance from Naraka or Drew Horton, whichever he prefers the most for this project. There's some odd time stuff in here. These guys are thinkers. The drums are the standout on this track in particular. Then you go into Endless Symmetry, which is that clean intro I pointed out that really stuck out to me, that has the two separate guitar parts that interplay with one another. Good guitar playing bands can do that. And it's definitely a lot of credit to guys that maybe get in the jam room and just play back and forth with each other and get a feel of that. But playing those different chords or those different arpeggiated parts, and it all feels like the same. It just sounds like one big kind of hellscape as you're descending down. It kind of feels like Dante hasn't been able to find his way out of the inferno. And then we go to the track Labyrinth Charm, which is another fantastic track. It is also the single, I guess, from the record that has a guest spot from Derek Rydquist, who is currently in the Zenith Passage, but is most known from his work with arguably the Faceless on their Planetary Duality record. His work with the Zenith Passage, great album. Can't knock that at all. It was one of my favorite albums from last year. But man, he has a presence with his vocals that are really well. He's been in, I believe, another band called Bereft for a period of time. And he adds a lot to this, but it also adds to the fact that you've got a great vocalist in this band on this record, and Lord Fowl. They're very similar sounding. It's almost like who's doing what on this track. It's kind of a back and forth with them. I believe Derek's even in the video. Hopefully my research proved me right, but I believe Lord Fowl is even referred to as Demon Carcass 2, which is, there must be some connection there. Maybe they're, the friends outside, or maybe there's, some inside joke there that I don't get. But this track in particular feels like a track that Derek would be on. It definitely has a little bit more in vein with some of the techie stuff, all of the Faceless Planetary Duality. I mean, there's a massive 16 to 32 bar period where it's just a variation of the same riff. It's just the pace of it changes. That authority through repetition thing. My personal favorite track is the title track. I think it blends everything together, and then it kicks right into the final track, Gary on the Plummet. One of those final tracks that is just a great culmination of all the things on the album, all of the different stylings, all of the different samplings, all the black metal, the death metal, the doom, the keyboards. You could probably even hand this to like a goth music fan, and they might enjoy a lot of aspects of this. I thoroughly enjoyed this record. It definitely evokes a lot of negative emotion or a feeling of dread, which I love about a lot of records. Because if you're a fan of black and death metal or any sort of extreme metal, you're probably not having the best day all the time. And this is one of those records you can put on in a rainy day where it's going to meet that emotion, but it makes you feel better in the long run. Again, we just did a review on Slint Spiderland, and this evokes a lot of the same emotions. I don't want to miss out on any of the band members here. We've got Naraka, Drew Horton on bass. We've got guitars credited to DS, guitar credited to AS. That's Daniel Salinas and Alonso Santana, and vocalist Lord Fowl. But this is a great record. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Everything about this record is fun. Everything about this record is enjoyable. I think I've already found a competitor for one of my albums of the year, and we're only in March. So Let me know what you guys think. Let me know if I rambled too much or if I got anything incorrect. Any of the guys in the band hear this, I do apologize about any of the pronunciations. Thank you all for listening yet again.
What's up?